Hi there crafters! In today's video I'm going to show you how to make faux ceramic tiles and plates using paper crafting supplies. They do look like ceramic tiles, only that they are not just as heavy and fragile. Also, all the tiles I'm going to create are going to be different sizes and all the different patterns. That's why it's going to be a longer video, so sit back, grab a snack, relax and enjoy watching. First, I'm going to do some stamping on a thick, smooth white cardstock. I'm using the two large stamps from Circle Brush Stroke stamp set by Paper Discovery. The ink I'm using is Ultramarine by Altenew. It doesn't have to be a permanent ink, by the way. And I do recommend to use smooth cardstock versus textured one, because this one is more similar to the tiles. I'm going to stamp the images twice whenever necessary. Also, I will be listing all the supplies I'm using down below in the description and on my blog. Now I'm using a heron and a fish image from the same stamp set. I will also be using Nested Circles card builder set by Paper Discovery, and that one coordinates perfectly with the stamp set. You can use the decorative inserts or just go without them. This time I'm only using the outline circles. So the first two ceramic plates are going to be circle shaped. First, I'm going to create the shapes of my plates and tiles and decorate them, and then I will be turning them into actual tiles. I'm going all over the edges of the plate with Tumbled glass distress ink. I'm also adding some to the bottom to kind of ground my heron. The next stamp set I'm going to use is Square Brushstroke stamp set. It's very similar, the same style as the circle one, only that it's the squares. So you can see I have stamped the background already onto that circle. It's the beautiful wave image, and now I'm going to stamp my focal image, which is the cherry blossom. I'm using coordinating color inks by Altenew. They are Eastern Sky and Ultramarine. Then again, I'm adding some distress inks. I'm going over the edges, and I'm also adding some color around that branch to help it stand out even more. You can totally use different colors, but I have just decided to make all my tiles traditional blue and white. So now I'm also going to add some fun effect. It's the very small splattering. So I'm inserting the distress marker into the distress spray tool. Forgot how it's called exactly. And then I'm adding the fine mist around the fish and around the heron. And by the way, the wave background stamp that I used on the previous tile is a brand new one by Simon Says Stamp. I will have it linked below as well. I think that something is missing to that small round tile, so I have decided to add one more tiny detail. I'll be using that small stamp from Square Brush Strokes. I'm masking off a part of it that has flowers on it, and I will only have that petal shape stamped. Those brushstroke petals look a lot like water splash too, so I think they are going to match my fish. And this is the stamp that I told you about. It's a huge 6x6 rubber stamp, and I'm going to apply some light blue ink again, and I'm going to add the background onto the heron tile. I have masked off the heron image. Now when I have the background on its place, I'm going to peel off the mask. Now I'm going to create a really large plate, and this stamp, also 6x6 inches by Simon Says Stamp, called Bohemian Lace, is just perfect for it. The pattern is really similar to the ones that you can find on plates, so it's just made for it, you see. And by the way, you can make different size circles with this stamp. Here is the smaller one. All I have to do is to go around the edges with a light ink and add a little bit in the middle, and this plate is ready. But I haven't created the large one yet, so I'm going to use the whole stamp this time. I'm applying some embossing ink onto it, and I'm stamping the image onto a piece of watercolor paper. I'm pressing down the paper to make sure I have a nice ink transfer, and then I'm going to use some blue embossing powder. I'm applying the ink all over the image, then returning the excess into the jar. And now I'm going to use the brush to sweep off all that extra ink that created that tiny border on the edge. And then, of course, I'm going to use the heat tool to heat set all the powder. After I heat set the image, I will have to die cut it, and since the stamp is really large, it's 6 inches in diameter, you will need a really large circle dies to do that. And this set is of course perfect for it. It's nested circles by Paper Discovery, and this time I'm also going to use the decorative insert, not just the plain outline. This die is going to create a trellis border all around the stamped image, and it's going to make this circle look even more like a plate. And this is what the die cut image now looks like. And note that this die is the second largest circle from the set. The largest one is 8.5 inches. You can totally leave this plate as it is, but I have decided to color it. I'm going to use Peerless watercolors and a water brush, but any watercolors will do. My color scheme is going to be really limited. I'm just going to use some yellow and some light tealish turquoise blue. I'm trying to apply really little color and a bit more water to make my colors transparent and watercolor looking. If I want to make some areas darker, I can always add another layer once the first layer is dry. To color the petals, I'm going to create some gradient. It's easy to do, you just have to apply more color at the bottom of the petal. Then I'm taking off all the color from the brush, and then I'm applying some clear water and make it blend with the color. And this is how you make the gradient. I'm going to use the same technique to color the rest of the petals. And here I am darkening the circle by applying another layer. So now I'm done with the circle plates, and now I'm going to create some square tiles. Again, I'm using the stamps from a square brush stroke stamp set and the same ink color, which is ultramarine. I'm simply stamping the brush stroke and the bamboo leaf on the square tile that I have already die cut using this set. It's the Nested Squares card builder set, and it coordinates perfectly with the square brush strokes. I have used the smallest square from the set, by the way. And now I'm going to create another tile which is the same size, but I'm going to be more creative with the brush strokes this time. You see, I have applied some ink onto the larger square, and I'm stamping the horizon line here. Then I'm going to add the tree image, which is from the circle brushstroke set. The third one is going to feature a carp image. Then I'm going to use the same small flower die to add the splashes to the square tile as well. I have die cut the square using both the outline and the insert dies, and now I'm masking off the negative patterns using the washi tape. I'm simply aligning the edge of the tape with the edge of the tile, and this is how I create straight lines. Then I'm going to do my stamping. Again, I'm going to use this large cherry blossom branch, and this time I'm going to use more of this image because it's a larger tile. I'm going to stamp the background using the smallest brush stroke from the set and the lightest shade of blue ink, which is called Iceberg. I'm stamping the square brush strokes from corner to corner, overlapping the images a little bit, and that is going to create the background. Then I'm going to remove all the tape, and here I have the very nice traditional pattern in shades of blue. So now I have created all the tiles and plates that I wanted, and I'm ready to move on to the next step, which is adding dimension to them. You should have that dimension to mimic the real tiles. To add dimension to the circle tiles, I've used the same dies that I used for the outlines to create a few additional layers. I'm going to add at least 4 more layers to each of the circle plates. If you are using thinner cardstock, you might want to add even more layers. So now I'm applying some liquid glue onto the largest circle, and I'm sticking down the matching plain circle at the back. Basically, it's the same process for all the circles, so I'm going to show you just 1 or 2. So I'm using liquid glue to stick down all the layers, and I'm placing the decorated one on top. It might be a bit time consuming, but the result is worth it, and it's not hard to do as well. So you see how thick this tile is now. With the square tiles, you have 2 options. You can follow the same principle as with the circle ones, that is adding multiple layers, but I'm going to act differently. I'm just going to use a piece of chipboard and stick down my tile onto it using the liquid glue. Now I have to let it dry just a little bit, and then I'm going to cut it out. I'm aligning my ruler with the edge of the tile, and then I'm running the blade along the ruler multiple times to cut off the extra. With this technique, it's always better not to apply too much pressure. It's better to go over the same area several times. And although I'm cutting multiple times, the edge always turns out very smooth. And this is how I did all the square tiles. If you are planning to use those plates as hangings, you might want to punch some holes in it. So I'm using the ruler again to keep the holes straight, and then I'm using my crocodile tool to punch the 2 holes. Now I have added all the dimension I needed to my tiles and plates, and now I'm ready for the final step, which is going to be the glazing. I have applied Versamark ink all over the surface of my plate, and then I'm going to add some clear chunky embossing powder. This one I'm using is by Wow. Then I'm going to use the heat tool to heat set this powder. Since it's so dimensional, it takes much more time to melt it than with the regular embossing powder. But the result is that you have much thicker glaze that you would normally have, and also it has some natural imperfections that are very similar to the natural glaze. This is what I mean. And by the way, it's very nice to add one layer of chunky powder and then follow by one layer of regular embossing powder. For this tile, I'm going to use just a regular clear embossing powder, and it's also going to work great. The regular powder is gonna give you a much thinner glaze layer, but it's going to be just as glossy. You can also try to use glitter embossing powders for glazing, but since I'm going for a traditional look, I'm only using the plain ones. This is how the finished glaze looks like. This time I applied the regular embossing powder. For the next 3 square tiles, I'm going to use regular powder again, but this time I'm applying 3 layers. This is going to result in a very smooth but really thick glazing. So you see, you can experiment with the embossing powders that you have. I can say that my favorite way of glazing seems to be 1 layer of chunky embossing powder followed by the 1 layer of regular embossing powder. This is exactly what I did on this largest tile. And this is how you create the 4 ceramic tiles and plates. Now I'm going to show you how all of them look like. So now I guess you are wondering how you can use all those tiles on actual projects. Well, I will be showing you that in my future videos, and I'm going to use every single one of those tiles. Those glazed tiles can really add a lot to a variety of paper crafting projects. I'd like to say a huge thank you to all of those wonderful people who have watched the video to this point. I will be back really soon with a part 2, and I hope to see you again. I wish you all a beautiful day. Bye bye!